Hi, I'm Jeremiah. Welcome to my channel where I talk about books and authors. In this video, I'll be talking about 4 authors who stutter. The people who I'm going to talk about were lifelong stutterers. They didn't grow out of it. They didn't overcome it or live in denial about having it, but they just accepted it and lived their lives and continue to talk even though they did stutter, and continue to participate in life even though they did stutter. And I think that the men who I'm going to talk about have a lot to teach us, and so I'm excited to share their examples with you. So I'm going to just talk about them chronologically, starting with Lewis Carroll. Lewis Carroll was the pen name for Charles Dodgson. Dodgson was many things. He was an ordained deacon for the Church of England. He was a lecturer in mathematics. He was a photographer. He was a storyteller. He's most known, of course, for his books Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There. And he happened to stutter his entire life. It's very well documented in several biographies that I've read and in the thoughts and recollections of people who knew him. Again and again, his speech comes up. He tended to have an easier time talking to younger children. That led to him developing all of these stories when he did talk to children, and a lot of material for his books. It is very clear that he stuttered throughout his life, but he continued to talk. He continued to be engaged and active in his community, and he contributed a lot. I think serves as a good example of someone who's extremely intelligent, but just happens to, for whatever reasons, happen to stutter, and but he didn't let that hold him back from living life and from doing what he thought he needed to do in order to contribute and be himself. Somerset Maugham is the next author who I'll talk about. Maugham is one of my favorite authors. I enjoy his work very much. It's made a tremendous impact on me. And he's another author who stuttered his entire life. I've read several biographies about him, and yeah, it's very, very clear that he did stutter from a young age, and that had an influence on his life and turned him toward writing as a means to express himself. He was commercially very popular and very successful. He made a lot of money. He was very successful as a novelist and as a playwright. He had a very powerful influence over several authors. Ian Fleming of the James Bond stories said Maugham was a huge influence on him, and Maugham's spy novel, one of the first ones written as Shinden, was a huge influence on him. So without Maugham, we probably wouldn't have James Bond. And George Orwell also was a huge fan of Maugham, and said that Maugham was a huge influence over him, and Maugham's writing style was one that he deeply appreciated and studied. So without Maugham, we probably wouldn't have George Orwell. And Maugham did write a semi-autobiographical novel called Of Human Bondage. And in this novel, instead of having the main character stutter, he gives him a clubbed foot instead. It seems to make sense because stuttering is hard to represent in print, and it doesn't translate very well, and it often comes off as comical. But using the clubbed foot, though, I think is very, very effective in terms of still demonstrating the stigma attached to his deformity and the bullying and just the impact that it has on someone's life. It translates the same. And with Of Human Bondage, you can tell that Maugham was a person who stuttered and that it did dramatically affect his life. And I've read it twice, and it's meant a lot to me. And I'll leave a link below to an interview with Maugham. It's at the very end of his life when he's an old man, but you can tell he is visibly stuttering, and yet he's still talking. He's communicating. You can tell he's a little uneasy, but I think it serves as a great example of someone who's actively, openly stuttering, but that's just how it is, And I love having examples out there of very intelligent, very successful people who are stuttering, and yeah, it helps to normalize stuttering and to desensitize people to it and to help change the narrative. And I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, please be sure to at least check out part of the interview with Maugham. I think it's very enlightening, and I enjoyed watching it. And next I'll talk about Robert Heinlein. He was a science fiction author. He was huge back in the late 20th century, during the golden age of science fiction. And a lot of the war generation and the boomers just worship Heinlein. He won all the major awards for science fiction writing, and he made a huge impact on the field. There's not as much information about Heinlein's stuttering as some authors, but it is very clear that he was a stutterer. He said it himself in a speech, and I'll leave a link to it below. It's kind of a weird speech, but yeah, he does make it very clear. He says that he is, and he was, and he still is a stutterer, and how that explains the pauses in his speech. And in some of his biographies, there is mention of him in letters talking about his stuttering, and how he used to listen to King George VI on the radio, and feel for him when King George was stuttering, and how he could identify with the king. But yeah, he seemed to come to terms with his stuttering, and he was willing to talk about it and be open about it, and still live his life, and contribute greatly to his field of interest. And lastly, I'll talk a little about contemporary author David Mitchell. He was born in 1969. He's from England, and then he spent some time in Japan, and now he lives in Ireland. And he is a contemporary novelist who a lot of people really love, especially the more academic critics just worship him. And he's probably most well known for his novel Cloud Atlas, which was turned into a film a few years back that brought him a lot of attention. And he has talked a lot about his stuttering openly. He's done a lot of radio and TV interviews. If you watch him online, you can tell that he does actually have some stuttering in his speech. He is talking and he is stuttering. I think that's wonderful, and I'm very grateful for him in that sense, that he is open to talking about it, that he does stutter in public and in his very public role. He did an interview with Stutter Talk podcast, and here recently he wrote an introduction to this book, Stammering Pride and Prejudice. prejudice. Actually, it's a forward, and so it's things like this that allow me to really appreciate him and what he's doing for the stuttering community. I think he serves as another example of someone who's very successful, extremely intelligent and talented, who just happens to stutter. And down below, I'll leave a link to a video. It's a talk with David Mitchell and Neil Gaiman. It's a long talk, and I think it serves as a good example of Mitchell's speech and the type of stuttering that he still has, and it's, I mean, I think it's great. He's up there, he's talking, he stutters sometimes here and there, but I mean, who cares? So I think that all four of these men are good examples, and those are just four authors. There are a lot of other authors who stutter, but I just focused on four who had meant a lot to me personally, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you for tuning in, and if you stutter, go ahead and stutter. Try not to let it bother you. Surround yourself with people who will accept you for who you are.